Hi there everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Simple Knit podcast. My name is Eleanor and you can find me on Instagram as Simple Knit Co. I'm coming to you from a very sunny and windy Sunday morning in August in Brisbane, Australia, where I live, and I'm here to chat all things knitting. So if this is your first time checking out the podcast, welcome. It is lovely to meet you. And if you are a returning viewer, as always, thank you so much for stopping by. If this is your first time checking out this style of podcast, it's basically just a show and tell with craft. So I'm going to sit here and tell you about all the things that I've been knitting recently. And feel free in the comments below to say hi, tell me where you're coming from, tell me what you've been making. I always love to hear from you in the comments or on Instagram. And yeah, I hope you're all keeping safe and well, and you're here for the knitting. So pour yourself a drink. I have a nice cup of coffee here in a nice little keep cup, and yeah, let's talk about some knitting. This is honestly like the 17th time I've tried to introduce this podcast, and that was the least awkward, so we're going to go with that one. Somehow today I've just forgotten how to talk to my phone about knitting. But that's okay, maybe it's the wind. Maybe the wind is sending us all a bit nuts. But we're here for knitting. So the first thing I have to talk about is what I'm wearing / also my finished object for this week. And it is my Astragal jumper. This is a pattern from issue 30 of Pom Pom Quarterly magazine. And it's by Ainur Birkenbaeva, who is Mama's Teddy Bear on Instagram. And it's a super cute little cropped 3/4 sleeve jumper with this really fun detailing around the neck. So I'm just going to come in a little bit closer because it's kind of, it's not actually a super dark coloured yarn. It is coming up a bit darker on the screen than it is in real life just due to the lighting situation. But it's more of like a khaki olivey kind of green. It is coming up a bit darker, but it does mean you can't really see the details. The yarn is Brooklyn Tweed Arbor in the Parker colorway, which I actually think is discontinued, which is a huge shame because it's so pretty. So, but I'm really glad I got my Parker jumper while I could. So as you can see around the neckline, it's just got this twisted rib into this textured detail that kind of looks like an onion to me, or a fig, or like a little candle glowing. I'm not really sure, but it's just kind of like a little abstract circular pattern, and then it comes down and then there's this little twisted rib hem with these little peaks, and there's one of those little peaks on the sleeve as well. So yeah, that is basically how it is, and how it is quite cropped. I knit it basically exactly as the pattern specified, and it comes to just the top of my belly button, and I have quite a short torso, so it is quite a cropped jumper. From looking at people's project pages and finished objects on Instagram, it looks like quite a few people, well, a lot of people do lengthen the body, which is because it's a top down. That would be quite easy to do because you can then just pick up the sleeves whenever you want and knit them, and then just use however much yarn you have left to finish the body. I think I knit the 3rd size, which is pretty normal for me in pom-pom patterns, and I use the recommended needle size. The biggest modification I made was when I was doing the body and the sleeves, because it is in reverse stockinette, so it's all the pearl stitches on the outside. I just turned it inside out because the sea of reverse stockinette would have, I don't know what it would have done to my brain, but I'm just not very fast and not very fast at purling, and also my tension isn't as consistent on purling as it is on knitting. So because the purl side is on the outside, I wanted it to be as smooth and consistent as possible. So all I did was, once I had finished all of the neck details, I just turned it inside out, because the beginning of the round is the center back. You didn't have to make any modifications for the sleeve placement or anything. I just turned it inside out, slipped the first stitch, and then went around with knitting it, and I kind of did the same on the sleeves. I picked it up from the right side so that I didn't get any weird bumps on the underarm, and then once I'd picked all the stitches up, I did the same thing, just turned it inside out and off I went, and then I turned it right way around for the detailing around the hems. So I'm really happy with how this sweater turned out. I love the fit. It's really lovely. I did have a couple of little gripes with the pattern. I really like this neckline, this quite like wide kind of almost boat shaped neck, but this is not what the neckline looks like in the pattern photos. The only way I could describe it is this is kind of how the neckline looks in the pattern photo. And I believe that the model's wearing the second size, which is only like the size smaller than mine. And like this just is not the neckline in the pattern. And every project that I've seen, there's maybe one in the smaller size that has even close to how the neckline looks in the pattern photos, which is fine. But if you just bought if you looked at the photo of the model in the pattern and thought, I want that jumper, and didn't look at any other pictures and knit it, that's not what you would get. And I think as the sizes get bigger, the neckline does seem to get significantly wider, which is, I think, just a grading issue, which is really, I mean, it's fine. It looks really nice with this neckline, but it's just not what the pattern picture looks like, which is a little bit annoying. And I mean, it's quite wide on me, and I have quite broad shoulders. So if you have narrow shoulders, I would definitely recommend maybe like casting on a smaller size at the neckline and then decreasing out to like increasing out to a larger size. But you shouldn't have to do that. The pattern photos should look like what the jumper's going to look like. Anyway, so that's like one little gripe. And the only other, I would call it a gripe. This is the first time I've ever actually not given a pattern 5 stars on Ravelry. I gave this 4 out of 5 firstly because it just doesn't look like the pictures, and secondly, as you can see, it's got this little like the peaked detail around the hem. Sorry, you're gonna see a bit of my stomach. It's got this peaked detail. So the pattern repeat is however many stitches with the peak in the center, and depending on what size you are, when you're knitting it, you do a certain number of stitches of just plain reverse stockinette along the back. I'm explaining this really badly, but basically what it means is there was however many repeats of the chart for this hem pattern, and then there was just like a block of stitches that didn't have any patterning in it, that you just did straight down, that would have looked like you just went straight down in reverse stockinette and then started the 1x1 rib for the hem. And on my size, the number of stitches that this took up was almost the size of an entire pattern repeat. So around the hem it would have done this like wave pattern, and then in the center back there just would have been like a straight line of no patterning. And that, I was thinking about it, I'm like, that is going to look really, really weird. So what I did to counteract that, and I think it's the size 3, and then one of the larger sizes are the ones that had the biggest gap between the pattern repeats. I'm explaining this really badly, but also I don't want to give away too much because it is a paid for pattern. So what I did was, I think the number of stitches that I had in this little block in the center back was either 4 or 6 stitches less than the pattern repeat. So I took that many stitches out of the center of the pattern repeat. So I did like the first, say there are 20 stitches in the pattern repeat, which I think there might be, actually I think there's 24 stitches in the pattern repeat. There's 24 stitches. So I just took the center 4 or 6, however many it was. I have it written down somewhere, but I took that many stitches out of the middle. So I did like the first 10 and then the last 10, or like the first 8 and the last 8 to, so that then I would have that, I have this like wave pattern, and it just means the one in the center back is like a slightly less high peak than all the others, but that I think is way less noticeable than having like this really even wave pattern and then like a zzz, like the heart rate has stopped in the center back. And that was just a really, and just not a, just a weird detail that was a little bit, I'm not sure. But I just wouldn't have, I think it would have looked really weird if you just had that like bit in the center back. That just could have been, I don't know if it was graded differently or if the pattern repeat was over us. You could have done, I know that magazines have a limited amount of space, so they would have only been able to do one chart. So you're kind of fixed to a certain number of stitches, and to make it work for a large array of sizes can be difficult. I do understand that. But I just think it would have looked really weird. So I was like scrutinizing everyone's pictures of their finished garments, and no one had pictures from the back, so I couldn't see what anyone else had done or how it looked, if people had just left it. So yeah, that's what I decided to do. If you are making this and that was really confusing, feel free to send me a message and I'll try and explain it a little bit better. If I like was pointing to the part of the pattern in front of you, it would be much easier. But as I said, it's a paid for pattern, so I don't want to be breaking any IP laws. But overall, I am super stoked with this jumper. It's going to be really cute over skirts and dresses and things. I think dresses in particular, because it is super short, it actually stops basically right at where my natural waist is. So it'll work really well with a whole bunch of clothes that I have. So I'm really stoked. That is the Astragal. What else have I been making recently? I have here a half finished object, very organized today. I'm just making this pair of simple 2x2 rib socks out of Knit Picks Felici in the Dance Party colorway. So I'm just making these. They're just a plain 2x2 ribbed sock. So I've done 64 stitches on a 2.25mm needle, a little Eye Partridge heel flap, normal heel flap and gusset construction, and then just a slightly different toe to how I normally do them. I was getting a bit sick of the way I was doing regular toes, so I will put the instructions below. It's just a normal wedgie kind of toe. And yeah, that is what it is. It's really fun yarn. I mean, anything self-striping, most of the fun comes from the yarn anyway. So that's my sock that I've been carrying around in my handbag. I have started the second one, but I've literally done 2 rows. Very exciting. And I did wind off a little bit of yarn at the start of the ball so that I have a properly matching pair. So that's the knitting that I've been carrying around in my handbag. And I do have one other project that I actually just cast on last night. So I'd finished my big jumper project, and I think one of the reasons it's taken me quite a while to finish this jumper is I just haven't really had much brain space lately for, well, almost anything, but for knitting in particular. I just haven't felt like it. I've gotten home from work, I've been super tired, and I just kind of like lie on the couch like a vegetable and stare at the TV for an hour and then fall asleep. I think it's been like really windy and things here, so I haven't been sleeping super well. So I wake up like really early in the morning before my alarm goes off, and then by like 9 o'clock at night, I'm done. I'm done for the day. My brain is completely done. But what I was kind of craving, which I kind of got with this pattern, is just like something that has a little bit of interest but is mostly just plain mindless knitting. And I remembered that I had this yarn that I bought on holiday last year. It's from Cushendall Woolen Mills. I got this yarn in Ireland, and it's a sport weight 100% pure new wool, 100 grams to 300 meters, and the colorway is called Cinnamon. It's this really nice, rich, reddy color, and I've been wanting to make I got 2 balls of that, so enough to make a shawl, And I kind of, and this shawl was just kind of exactly what I wanted to make out of it. So I have just started a little shawl here. So the pattern that I'm using is the Gatsby shawl by Dawn Henderson. It's a free pattern on Ravelry, which is amazing. And it's just a simple garter stitch shawl that then has kind of chevrons with bobbles around the edge, which is really cute and fun. But most of it is just a garter stitch shawl. You can see it just has this little spine of slip stitches up the center, but the rest of it is just plain garter stitch, all knitting. The increases, sorry, are really easy to keep in, like, you don't have to do anything fancy for the increases, so you don't need to be looking at the pattern. So I can just knit on this while I'm watching TV or listening to a podcast, and it's mindless enough that I don't have to be, my brain doesn't have to be switched on, but it's something to do with my hands, and it's just like the right amount of brain input for me at the moment. And I'm really, really loving the color of this yarn as well. So it's a little bit kind of tonal variegated. I don't know how it's picking up on the camera, but it's kind of a nice combination of like this warm rusty red with like a darker kind of Bordeaux-y kind of color. That's just what I see. And I'm just really enjoying the way this yarn, it is like a scratchy, there's no other word, it's a scratchy yarn, but I can feel that there's a lot of like spinning grease in it. So I think by the time it's done and blocked, it is going to soften up a bit, but that also means it's going to be really warm. But I'm really enjoying the color. This pattern is exactly what I needed. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting some serious work done on this shawl, because that's the main reason I hadn't been knitting very much, was just I wasn't working on a pattern that matched the amount of mental energy I was able to give to my knitting at the moment. But I'm really, really thrilled with that. And yeah, so that's what I'm making. I do have one other project that I really want to cast on, that hopefully I will have the mental energy. So it is from my favorite issue of a magazine ever. It is issue number 8 of Amirisu, which is fall winter 2015. It's this one. I've kind of set this like probably lifetime, but probably won't take that long, goal of I want to knit every pattern in this magazine. There's only like 8 patterns, I think, in these older issues of Amirisu, and I've already done 2. I have knit the Void Shawl by Melanie Berg, and this pattern on the cover, which is Flaum by Justina Lakowska. I've knit that. So I bought the yarn for this jumper ages ago. It is the Rose by Jose Paquin, and it's this cute little 2-tone ribbed jumper. I think it's really adorable. Got a nice little funnel neck. It's just really simple, a little bit more fitted, but I think it's really lovely. All the patterns in this are lovely. As I said, I want to knit all 6 or 8 of them. But I did have yarn for this already. So I have some, it's knit in DK weight. So I have some hand-dyed DK merino from Fibersmith, one of my favorite, it's a yarn shop in Melbourne, and Leslie dyes some of my favorite yarn ever. So this is 100% sustainable extra fine Australian merino, and I have, for the main lighter colour at the top, I've kind of replicated the colours in the pattern, but not really. So for the lighter colour at the top, I have this one, which is called Granite Terrazzo, which is like a grey base with little flecks of brown and blue. There's a good spot there. You can kind of see all the colours in it. And then for the lower, darker colour, I have this really dark, called Northern Moss. It's this really dark khaki green. It's coming up a little bit. These colours look nothing alike in real life, and they look almost the same on camera. But the colour that you're seeing on camera is closer to this. It's this really dark khaki with a kind of grey base, dark grey base. So I think those colours will look awesome together and will make a really cute jumper. And it also means I'll have this dark colour like around my cuffs where I get a bit grubby because I'm a grot. So yeah, I'm really excited to cast that on. It looks like a really kind of straightforward pattern. The stitch pattern is pretty simple, and yeah, really excited to knit that. So I just have to wind my yarn and I'm ready to go with that one. So that's kind of all the crafting that I've been doing. As I said, I haven't been doing all that much knitting, but I finished a jumper, so I don't know what I'm complaining about. And I know that some of you like to know what I'm reading as well. I think last week I did talk about, I don't have the book with me, the new Ottessa Moshfegh novel, which is called, I'm going to look it up because I can't believe I've forgotten. I just read it the other week. I read it in just a couple of sittings. It was so good. It's something about night and murder. What's it called? Death in Her Hands. Took me long enough, didn't it? So I read the new Ottessa Moshfegh novel, Death in Her Hands, and it was amazing. It was every book that she writes is different to the last. So you can't kind of go into an Ottessa Moshfegh novel thinking I've read one of her last book, it's going to be like that one. There's always like a complete, well, not really actually. So there's always like in her last 3 novels at least, there's Maglue at the start, which is quite different to all the others, and then there's her short story collection, which is also quite different. But her last 3 novels have kind of centered around a unlikable female protagonist, basically, which is something that you just don't, it's so, like, we're so primed, I think I talked about this in the last episode, but we're so primed to relate to unlikable male narrators, but when it comes to female narrators and female protagonists, there's a part of us that just expects them to be likable and relatable. And I really like the way that Ottessa Moshfegh challenges that in us and makes us relate to these unlikable characters in a new and different way, and really challenges the way that we interact with particularly female protagonists. Anyway, Death in Her Hands was really good. It's not as confronting. Her last 2 books have been quite like visceral and confronting. It's beautiful. Really earned that English major. Quite in your face. Yeah, confronting is really the only word that keeps coming into my head. That means I'm trying to find another word and the searches are just pulling up the same bad result. But they are very in your face. And this one is a little bit more subdued. It actually kind of has that, and I just say this because I love David Lynch as a story creator and artist, a filmmaker, everything. But it has that kind of, if you've seen The Lost Highway by David Lynch, that kind of like Mobius strip plot that loops back on itself and it kind of drags you into the world that the characters are in, and you lose track of time in a way, but you don't realize that you've lost track of time until it gets to the end. You're like, wait, where am I? It has that like Mobius strip plot feature that I think is really interesting because it really does resist interpretation and resists a concrete answer of what does this mean, what has happened, which I love because it's a mystery, because you can't know and there's no answer, and I love it. Yeah, I really recommend it. It's very like engaging, and because it's like an endless thought of the narrator, like the story doesn't stop and you don't like stop and like dip back in, you just keep going in one straight line. It has that almost like cinematic feel with when you're reading, you don't feel like there are breaks for you to stop. So it's really, really good. I didn't realize I was going to get so excited about that book, but I haven't spoken to anyone about it yet, and it's really good. Highly recommend. And for something completely different, I'm reading like literally probably the exact opposite of a book now. I felt like something a bit light and kind of fluffy and funny, and I don't have any unread Evelyn Waugh in my pause at the moment. So for the closest thing, Howard's End by EM Forster. I've never actually read an EM Forster book before, but it's really good. It's just really light and kind of fluffy, and that kind of like, I love this like turn of the century British novels dissecting class and like, but it's just a dumb romance but dressed up as something a bit better, which is nice. It's great. It's great. I love this kind of thing. So yeah, and then and the great thing when I read this, there's a cool movie starring, it looks like Jude Law and Helena Bonham Carter, and it looks like, look, Emma Thompson's in it. I don't know, is that Maggie Smith? I can't tell who the guy is. I know that it's not Marlon Brando, but it looks like Marlon Brando in The Godfather. Yeah, I have a fun movie to watch at the end. But yeah, this is just light fluff, but as I've said, I don't have a lot of brain space at the moment, so this is ideal. So, what are you making? What are you reading? I feel like towards the end of that podcast, I actually settled back into talking to you, to a camera again. It was a very awkward start. As I said, it took about 17 takes. But please let me know in the comments below what you've been reading, what you've been making. Tell me how you are, what's going on in your little corner of the world. I hope that you're keeping safe and well. And yeah, I really do appreciate you taking now almost half an hour out of your day to hang out with me, and that really does mean a lot. So yeah, come say hi in the comments below, come say hi on Instagram, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your weekend and a very productive week ahead. Bye.